our series that talks about challenges for academia in the 21st century, and we're very happy today to have Marilyn Billings, who is the Scholarly Communications and Special Initiatives Librarian at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And she's going to focus on how the University of Massachusetts Amherst Library has established a journal publishing program within its suite of scholarly communication services, and sort of how that came about and what they're doing with that. So we're excited about that. Marilyn Billings has held this position since 2006. She provides leadership in alternative scholarly communication strategies, including open access, open education, and the role of digital repositories in today's academic environment. She's the head of the Office of Scholarly Communications at the W.E.B. Du Bois Library, and provides oversight and management of the UMass Amherst Institutional Repository, which is called ScholarWorks at UMass Amherst.
Right.
Sorry, she knows a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they host a bunch of open access journals, they host conferences, they have research center outputs, and faculty scholarly materials, in addition to a robust ETD collection. So she provides leadership and inspiration for the campus's Open Education Initiative, which began in 2011.
Yeah.
So we are very happy to have Marilyn. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming today. I'm assuming this is going to be a little bit of an informal chat, kind of supported by my slides. So we can, and I'm kind of dealing with this cold thing. So hopefully it will work okay and it will record all right for the guy in the back. Okay, good. So again, thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate your taking the time out of your day to participate with me in this conversation, which I think is really critical. So here's where I think we are, as you mentioned, and I'll be talking about this kind of how we got started. We started with our scholarly communication program back in 2005 and 6, right after I got done with a sabbatical. This is what sabbaticals can do to you. And I was in my sabbatical, I was looking for alternative models for scholarly communication, particularly an IR, not knowing where that was going to take me into the future. But all of the pieces that are here are represented in our repository, and obviously we're going to focus on open access journals for the moment, but I'm glad to talk about any of these other parts. And then talk about lessons learned and best practices and the what's next, which is, I think, the best kind of place to be in to go. So just a bit about UMass Amherst in case you don't know. So this is the library. As opposed to you having 4 floors, we have 26 plus 2. And I'm on the 19th floor. And so I have a beautiful view of this place. And it's a public land-grant research intensive university with over 30,000 students, with plans to increase to more than 35,000 in the next, I don't know, for 2020, I guess. I don't really know for sure. We have over 1,300 full-time faculty and a number of bachelor's, master's, and all of those are changing, it seems, all the time now because of all the interdisciplinary research and skill sets that are being used. So this is one of my favorite slides from way back when I went to a scholarly communication roadshow event, however many years ago that was, from Lee Van Orsdel. So she's retired now already. But just thinking about the traditional scholarly communication system, and this is where we were when we kind of started. We were here with the publishers being the big enchilada. We had the peer review process within that with the editors. The academic library was a big piece of this, but we saw our budgets going pretty flat and the costs of the journals and monographs and everything else dramatically increasing. Many of you know this story that we call the serials crisis, limited access to our end users, and the need to figure out that different model. What were those alternative models? So we wanted to get rid of the serials crisis. We wanted to kind of get a little more even-steven with the publisher, and then what happens with the academic library role, and that's what I kind of want to talk about. The author becomes more empowered because we're talking with them about their author rights and things like that, how they get their funding, becomes even more important in this newer model. What happened to my screen? It's just the screen, okay. We started to see folks like like Harvard and others start with developing some open access mandates. Boy, I really wanted to go there. Oh, couldn't kind of get there. Peer review seriously was something we needed to talk with the faculty about, and how that happened, and how they were the ones, the authors, were the ones empowered with this new kind of model, and always had been, but the publishers had taken on the compilation of all of this. So just looking at what new business models could look like, what effect would open access have on this? And then what we wanted was to have, obviously, easy access to materials by the end users. And where's the library in this picture? So those are the big pieces that came into the new model. So you've all seen something similar to this, I imagine. If this thing goes forward, there we go. So, as I mentioned earlier, looking at these alternative models, all of these elements, not this so much at that time, but that's happened since 2011, and open research also. But the first two items for sure. And then you can guess what we're going to talk about today, which is more the open access journal part, and how that was part of the model that we created. So I would need to say that we are a Digital Commons bpress platform. So that allowed us a little more infrastructure in place from the beginning when we started our repository, to have not only capturing the faculty research, community engaged activities, but also had a platform ready-made for us for looking into journals and what we wanted to do with those. So some of the things when we were exploring these new alternative models, what were some of the opportunities that we saw present? So we obviously could start creating new types of content and formats. I had done a survey of faculty to find out what they really wanted to put. If we had an institutional repository or some such critter, what did they want to put in it? Did they even know what I was talking about? And so some of them were really inventive and creative, and were looking for how to save the new types of content and the new formats that were coming out with the work that they were doing. They wanted to see a broader dissemination of their research. They really were frustrated with the closed journal model and access to scholarship. So some of them were really ready to go and get started. They were very interested in visibility and the citation impact factor, both at the journal and at the more detailed level, but we didn't have that really articulated at the time like we do now. And they wanted to be able to reuse content. They wanted their students to be able to do that. They wanted to be able to do it themselves. And have that permanent URL. They were sick of those 404 errors. That was just, they said, how can we engage in any kind of digital scholarship when we keep getting that kind of a result? And how can you, the library, help us? We had a lot of conversation about the rights management of content. I'll talk more about this in a few minutes. And the quality of the roles that faculty had always been having in the scholarly communication system as authors, as peer reviewers, and editors of journals. At the same time, when we were talking with faculty, they had all kinds of questions. They had questions about what kind of value was there in publishing in these newfangled open access journals. What was the impact on their tenure and promotion? Because they weren't sure their P&T committees would really be excited about these new open access journals. And we still have these debates going on today in some of the departments. Not so many, though. I guess I should say that I've gone around and met with some of those promotion and tenure committees, and they say, you know, as long as the scholarship is high quality and it's reviewed by colleagues that are highly regarded in the field, we don't care if it's open or in a closed journal. we're open to more of the good thinking about this. So that's a real positive that's been happening, I'd say, even over just the last 3 years. So, and then they also saw potential problems with this author pays financial model, and we'll talk a little more about solutions for that in a second. Copyright issues. Oh my gosh. We are so fortunate to have a copyright and information policy librarian on our staff that she can address all of these kinds of issues that faculty have, whether it's copyright on their work that they published previously and they now see that they don't have the rights to that, and can they maintain their rights, all those questions. And then they had questions about, well, if I'm going to publish in your open access journal, then how am I going to get support for the proofreading, copy editing, and other publisher services that we're used to seeing from, the big ones, Elsevier and others. So, and that is still, I would say that is still an issue as we look going forward for libraries. So then we started having conversations with the faculty about, well, what can they be doing to move towards open access. So this is all probably familiar to you, but these are the kinds of things that when we started having workshops, what we started saying to them that they needed to manage their copyrights, retain their author rights, select journals and publishers with open access friendly policies, and the open funding using our local services and tools whenever they possibly could. Come talk to us, discover what we have to offer so that we can work together towards this new model, and then talk more about our local institutional repository. So this would have been probably between 2006 and, 2006 and 2011, let me say, that we were doing some of these steps. So just a little more detail about how to manage copyrights, and I'll leave these slides with Dania, I think, at the end. So you can have I know that a lot of you already have all this information. But it was kind of new and innovative at the time to talk with faculty about how do they keep their rights, because they were very concerned that they would be punished in some way or something would happen to them because they were fighting the publishers. So I'll tell you a story about a graduate student who was in the communication department, and he was doing a special issue along with some colleagues at other institutions in a journal of communication, I think it was. And it was a Nature journal. No, Taylor and Francis journal, sorry. And he said, Marilyn, I really care about this open access thing. I really want to be a faculty member into the future, but now's the time I'm going to plant my feet and make a statement about keeping my rights. And I said, okay, so let's talk through all of this and then get all of your co-authors aware of all of this and stay together. It's really important. You are empowered because it's a special issue, so they want all of your work. And we'll just keep them moving forward towards you keeping your rights to your materials. Well, it went back and forth, as you can imagine. And eventually, Taylor and Francis came back to them with a contract that allowed them to keep their rights to their manuscripts. And this hadn't been happening for anyone. And they never publicized that particular type of contract, right? But all of the students really stuck together. And, I'm just, the whole time I'm sitting there going, yes, please stay together. And no, I'm not really sure that this is really what's going to work. But I just kept encouraging them to continue down the road. And I was so pleased that they did eventually win the day. So that was something, and they were able to do other things with their works afterwards. No. It was kind of a revelation, really, I thought. It was like, and as the librarian who was doing the encouragement and providing all the tools, I was hoping that they'd need to be able to continue to push this. It was a test of are the faculty and the authors of these articles really as empowered as we kind of think they are at that time? And it proved true. Because there was no way that Taylor and Francis was going to even be able to publish this special issue. And they were already committed to it. I don't remember what the topic was, but in communication. So we all are aware that we want to also talk to our faculty about if they're really interested in pursuing open access as a model for their own research, to determine what kind of open access journals already exist. And also look at Sherpa Romeo and publisher websites to see what their procedures and policies really are. And if possible, try to pick those. So we're all aware, I believe, of the open access granting agencies. Back when the National Institutes of Health first did theirs back in 2009, our Office of Research came to us and said, oh, what do we do? How do we comply with these new kinds of regulations? And so it was good that we'd had this amount of background that I've been talking about so far to be able to help them create a subject guide on ways that they can comply. We had the repository that they could put content in. And so since that time, as you know, many national funding agencies have open access policies. One of the ones that's a fairly recent development is the Open Research Funders Group that was just created in December. I don't know if you know about this group. It's people like Sloan, Davis, and some others that are working together to make sure that the kinds of policies and procedures that they have in place kind of match each other so they can stay more empowered with things. And they're the private entity. Oh, the Gates Foundation is another one. So they're all working together just to make sure that they're working for the same purposes. So then I said to myself, well, what are some of the library roles that I see happening in scholarly communication? Who are the different groups in the library that I'm talking to all the time? So obviously, I came to it with the fact that I really felt that the library is the center of communication in the campus, whether it's working with the students, with the faculty, researchers, whomever, moving on scholarly communication topics. We're a good partner to have with all of these groups. We've traditionally been the steward of scholarship, whether it's been with what the cataloger's doing, with collecting and organizing and providing access to information, whether it's the liaisons working with the faculty, whether they're doing collection development or kind of case point by point with their research. In my department particularly, there was all this assistance with copyright fair use, the use of Creative Commons licenses, working also with liaisons on information and digital fluency with classes, whether they're undergraduate or graduate, working with graduate program directors, to sharing all of this information, and the development of our research data management services. So that really, primarily for us so far, has been in the STEM disciplines. So I don't know if you have found that same thing to be true here. So I thought we have a pretty broad expanse of where libraries and librarians are fitting into the overall conversation of scholarly communication. Awesome. Because I had this little department. And I know this is text heavy. It's just a screenshot. Just kind of ignore it. We'll go through the parts of it that I think are really important, but based on all the work that we'd done before, we decided we had to a little bit reinvent the way that we described and marketed the services that we had in our scholarly communication department so that it's embedded within our writing and research arm of the library's website. And there are pieces also connected to the teaching and learning part, especially, the copyright and publishing contracts. And so we tried to make this particular page brief words, but yet hopefully as intensive as and comprehensive as we could make it. So some of the things that we talk about quite a bit, in addition to the copyright and publishing contracts, is open access. And we have an open access research support fund I'll talk about in a second. The open education resources and teaching materials has taken off like no tomorrow since 2011 when we started that. And everything's kind of twirling around each other now after a few years of doing this. In the publishing services, not only are we offering conferences, journals, and monographs through our repository, but we're also working with our open textbook network and Pressbooks, which is a piece on top of a WordPress platform. Theses and dissertations have been a huge part of our work from the beginning of our repository in 2006, which has been a good way to segue into faculty, and it turns out, because the students get these hits on their theses and dissertations. They go and they tell their faculty member, wow, look at this. I've got all these hits from all over the world because I have this readership map. Faculty member goes, whoa, where is this all coming from? And so then we get engaged in conversations with some different academic departments that we hadn't actually been really in touch with so much. So that's been a good tool to use, I should say. So then ScholarWorks is the repository that we use for hosting many things. So we morphed our copyright services. We realized that with all these library roles that I just talked about, more people needed to become more familiar with copyright and fair use, especially it seemed our reserves and e-reserves folks who were working with the faculty on those kind of materials. And so that's why we created that new page, and we provide all kinds of educational opportunities. Workshops, we'll have consultations either with faculty or with library departments, academic departments. We'll go with liaisons to a department to talk about these topics, which include all the things you see listed there. One of the things that has seemed to gain a lot of interest with faculty has been the issue of reclaiming their copyrights for some of their older materials. So our copyright librarian, Laura Quilter, some of you may know her name, has been working on this at a national level to try to figure out something that we could do as a group. So this all seems normal. Questions, comments?
You had the educational events.
Mm-hmm.
What was the way that you would drive faculty to those?
It depends on, always, don't you love that answer? So it depends on who we expect the audience to be. So if it's going to be faculty that we're talking to, we usually try to go through the liaisons and we go to an individual academic department, because we don't find that they come to the library so much for programs. And if we can get 10 minutes of a faculty department meeting, that's really about all we can get, but it really works well. And then there becomes lots more dialogue with the departments. If it's graduate students, we'll work with the graduate school. They have an Office of Professional Development and set up workshops through them. Sometimes host them in the library, sometimes over in the graduate school, offer pizza. So, and then for the undergraduates, some programs want us to come in and talk about their rights and things like that, because they're actually having the students create content that they want to be able to compile into some final product. So then, finally, after a decade of work, hard work, it seems like constantly, last spring we got an open access policy approved by our faculty senate. The only important part about this whole thing is that April 7th of 2016, And then which became effective July 1st. This has led to a lot of faculty interest in the whole conversation about open access, more conversations with them, because as we were going through building momentum and support for this, people on in my department and liaisons would go to academic departments and have meetings with the faculty about what the intent was for the policy. It's for journals. It can also be for book chapters, not intended for monographs. We also developed, excuse me, a frequently asked questions document that accompanies the policy so that they can refer to those if they have questions. There were a lot of questions that kept coming up, and so rather than just answering them over and over, we decided that there's also other people out there who aren't asking the questions but have them. So that's why we created that document. And then we created an opt-out waiver. We really followed the Harvard plan. Peter Suber came out and met with us, I think the spring before that, with strategic folks who, for example, the faculty member who was the head of the Faculty Senate Research Council, the Faculty Senate head of the Research Library Council. Some of those folks who were people that were influential on campus who could assist us with this. And we really got the head of the Faculty Senate head of the head of the Faculty Senate Research Council to shepherd this. And it was his big push while he was the chair of that group.
So this didn't go through rank and tenure committee first, it went right to faculty?
The Faculty Senate. We, like I said, we had these meetings with the various faculty groups in academic departments during the course of January until April, well, probably through the end of March.
Okay.
We didn't get to all of the departments. We still have a lot of work to do. But it passed the Faculty Senate with basically not really much discussion because we had it all before. We had meetings with the Research Council, addressed many concerns there. We had meetings with the Graduate Council as well because of the ETDs and other things, research areas that the graduate students would have. So we did lots of legwork. It was amazing to me. It's like that was what we did last spring semester. And it was interesting too because by then explaining to the faculty and the students who were involved in this about what we were trying to do, they became really interested in what we had for publishing services, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But just for example, we had one faculty member come in from linguistics, and he was interested in his own faculty profile and what that did. And we just, you just sit around and have an informal chat. We have some nice easy chairs in our department that are nice for facilitating conversation. And he just got talking about, I just said to him, well, what are some of the dreams that you have? What are some of the things that you see that you want to do that you haven't been able to do so far because you feel like you didn't have like the services or the support you needed? Oh my, he went on. He wanted to create a linguistics service that was like Archive for the whole country. So we could do that. We can help you with that. I mean, it was really interesting to see, and he just kept going with the ideas, and then he went away. But then he comes back in little snippets, as he has 5 or 10 minutes. But just knowing that we have a really good plant now in the linguistics department, which works with our computer science people as well as the folks in the humanities, that's a good interdisciplinary academic area to be spending a reasonable amount of time in. So that was...
I got one more question.
Sure.
What was were there any champions among the administration, like among the deans or the provost of open access?
Yeah, I would say our chancellor is a huge proponent of open access. He came from Indiana and then went to Kentucky and then became our chancellor. So he's really in huge support of this. The provost, of course, is the administrative authority for the open access policy, and it's through her that then the library has the dictate or whatever to manage this. So, and we did, so the director of the libraries did have conversations with the Dean's Council about all of this and what the implications were, so that they also, a lot of them come to the Faculty Senate meetings. And many of them have academic appointments, so they have voting rights. And so it was important to get them on board too, yeah. But in the way back.
So if your chancellor is a big proponent, does this policy, like, are the other UMass campuses pursuing this as well?
So good question. So I asked them that question. And the UMass Boston already had a policy, but they'd kind of pushed it along under the table, so to speak. So people didn't really, I mean, I was very public about this. The medical school had tried to get this through, I think, the year before we did. And at the very last minute, it looked like it wasn't going to pass, and so the person withdrew it. And so they're working on it again now that we have it. Dartmouth and Lowell, I'm not sure exactly where they are. But yeah, but good question.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, did you find that pushing this through helped pave the way to devote resources, get resources devoted to the open access
Well,
effort?
I now have a full-time librarian working for me whose title is Open Access and Institutional Repository Manager. Yeah. Before that, I had scholarly communication residents. They'd be in for a couple of years and then be gone, and they're all over the place now, which is great. But so I have a new dean who came in August. So this is all through the auspices of my previous director. And he said to me, he said, Marilyn, you really need to have a full-time person helping you. Yes. So you're right. I could use a refresh in the department too while you're at it. That happened too. It was amazing. It was really, yeah. So that was all good, yeah. And as far as the Office of Research is concerned, so you might ask that question. So they've been involved with this. I mean, they're obviously integral to the Research Council work that happens. And we have librarians who are on a subcommittee within that council. This is all very detailed, isn't it? That's development of policies. And that was actually the first place we took this policy, was to that group, because it's the Research Council, and it's the subcommittee that does the policy. So then if that particular council and committee approve it all, then you have a lot more to stand on when it comes to going to other committees, like the Graduate Council for one, because that particular council is sometimes, it's challenging to get through the conversation that you want to have, because people have different lenses that they're looking at things with.
I'm just trying to understand your terminology for my university. Is your research council the IRB, what I would consider the IRB committee?
No, the IRB committee is something else. That's part of the compliance group,
Okay.
usually, from grants. So this is Faculty Senate,
Okay, yeah.
with whatever you call Faculty Council,
Council,
maybe.
yeah.
There are various committees and councils within the Faculty Senate
Okay.
that actually advise various vice chancellors. That's how ours is set up.
Okay.
Or they address these topic areas. So the Research Council works closely with the Office of Research. The Research Library Council within the Faculty Senate works closely with the library. The Graduate Council works with the graduate school. So all the ETD processes and the whole open access and embargoes and campus access, all that stuff had to go through that council. So I don't know how, I mean, usually,
It's not even similar.
yeah, but that's how we were able to get it to happen,
Okay.
by not working at the university level, at the faculty level. We were supporting it what the faculty wanted, not being the library staff out there going, here you are, let's do this. No, it's like, this is an alternative, this is an option, we'd like to provide educational opportunities for you in this, and this is the kind of results you'll get from it, and then get them to lead it. I tried the other. That didn't really work. So anyway, yeah. So this was really key for the whole open access journal momentum to be moving forward, and for the faculty to now, in their promotion and tenure committees, to really value the open scholarship. But I could talk, though there's another issue about that one, but I won't go there yet. I'll try to see how far we get. So one of the things, so then we said, if we're going to have an open access policy, we need to have things in place to support this. So we'd already talked about the publishing services, but I'll go there some more too. But the library director said, you need to have some funding to support these article processing charges, that APCs that you'll see happening for various journals that require the payment of those fees, you know, $5,000, $10,000 a shot for some journals. Or some journals, and we don't do hybrid journals. So if it's a journal that will have one particular article be open and the rest of the issue is closed, we don't support those. We only support complete open access journals, in case that was going to be a question. So because we want to really support this new model. And so I don't know where he got the funding from, I hate to say. I don't think it was acquisitions dollars. We have a pretty active Friends of the Library group that we've been able to get some funding from to be able to do some of this work that I'm talking about. So we created an application, we have guidelines. We tried to get some funding from the Office of Research, but his hesitation was that he was concerned that faculty would see this fund, they'd expend all of their monies on everything else and come to us after they'd spent everything else. We haven't seen that happening. In fact, it's more been, even graduate students will support the graduate students because they're writing up research that's happening at our university. And maybe folks who didn't have grants. Or they might have a certain amount that's been allocated within the grant and the charge is higher than that. So we had one for +1 that was pretty high that we provided partial support for.
I'm wondering, we have an issue on grants in which if we put something on that's an open access payment, it's usually outside of the period of the grant. Did you have issues with this?
I think that's what happened with one faculty member that we had. And so the particular article was getting published, I'm going to say a year and a half after the grant ended. Yeah. So that we can still support those kind of things. Yeah.
Just a question. I mean, 25,000 wouldn't go very far with
Oh.
given here, but what do you have criteria like submissions to ranked journals or something? Or?
They have to be completely open journals, and they have to be highly regarded. We've got the guide. Well, those are the funding guidelines, but yeah, we want it to be in DOAJ.
Do you review it like at the end of a quarter?
As they come in. So we started with that $25,000, and we've added more money since then, but that was what we started with.
So how far did that 25 go? How many were you able to cover?
I can't remember how many it was, but it actually lasted for a year and a half. But we've seen a lot of pickup in interest on this after the open access policy went through. So it's been really interesting to see now what that policy has done for awareness by the faculty compared to the previous 9 years. Don't give up is I guess what I'll say. Sure.
Did you say highly regarded? Did do you guys have guidelines for that so that it doesn't seem like on an ad hoc basis?
Right, so we can talk more about that, but one of the things is highly regarded editors in the field. It has to be people in the field who know that these are the kind of people that are highly regarded. So you usually, if you have a question, I shouldn't say you, but if we have a question about that, we'll talk with somebody else in the department and just make sure that our money is being spent in the right direction. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you don't use metrics at all? Is that what I'm hearing?
We haven't yet, partly because some of these are fairly new, and so the metrics, there really aren't any yet. Yeah. So we'll get there as, more of these journals are more established, I guess I would say, but obviously PLOS One is highly regarded as an example, yeah. So. So then we realized also we had to be more explicit about the kind of services that we offered, and it also helped me justify that new position I got to know that we could assist them with publishing and services. And so we knew through the BPress system that we had the library software supported by the library, and the staffing that was needed to support open access journal creation, the management of the process of getting a journal created, the whole process behind it all for where the materials would be submitted, the format of all of that on the back end of the system, ingesting of that content, all the way to the call for submissions that the faculty wanted to have be available. We worked with folks in technical services. No, it's IRM, it's a different name now. And there's a bibliographic metadata unit, and they've just been changing their names. So for all of the metadata application, the fact that once you have a journal created, we've got a whole checklist that you go through that includes some of these pieces. For the creation of the ISSN, I've done that myself, but I'm trying to see if the acquisitions people are interested in picking up this part of that process, which makes logical sense to me. The assignment of DOIs for articles, the whole, so when back to the cataloging folks, so when they do the metadata, obviously that's in our repository, but it also, they use it to create the MARC record or other records for OCLC and other discovery mechanisms. And then within the software itself, we have the peer review and the editorial management support that the editorial board needs to have in order to get the issues out. And then obviously we can say we have some preservation and storage mechanisms, and we can talk to them as well about data management needs, because we can put some of their research data in the repository as associated files. So that it's coming together. Mm-hmm. It's over the last, I'm going to say 3 years especially, because I was very fortunate to have as my last resident a person who went into libraries as her second career. She worked in publishing and before that, so she was able to really, even as a resident, be able to talk with us about the kind of services that publishers provide, and help us get these mechanisms in place. One thing I didn't put here was the creation of a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, that goes between the library and the primary editor who is at our institution, so that, you've got a 6-month leeway if one or the other decides they want to jump ship to someplace else. So we have that as well. Oops, wrong thing.
Quick, you said BPress is the host for.
Uh-huh.
How many do you have?
You're just perfect.
Can
So.
I ask a question just about using BPress? Do you have an alternative just in case they price themselves out of, beyond your budget?
We haven't done that yet. We haven't really actively been looking at the time, so I could back up a bit and say, well, why did we ever pick bepress in the first place? So back in 2005, when I did this and did the survey of the faculty and things like that, we were also going through an ILS switch. And that was also, had been under my rubric before. And so we moved from Innovative to Ex Libris, and there was zero, probably less than zero, support in any technical, like systems support directions. So that's why this became the best option at the time. And you know, we continue to scope the market and see what things are. But I can address that specifically. This Communication Plus one, which is the second one, I might have a screenshot of it in a minute here, is one that the person who was the managing editor was a graduate student. And he said he and I knew each other pretty well from that. No, he wasn't the one that did that previous example that I mentioned about working with Taylor and Francis, but it was that same department. And so he really wanted to start up a new journal. And so he came and met with me, and I told him what we had for services, and he said, okay, I'm going to go check out another option. So he went and downloaded OJS, and he got it all set up, and he comes back to me, he goes, Marilyn, this is just a lot. This is too much for me to manage this and have any time left to do all of the stuff I need to do as a managing editor. So I had tried to keep the conversation open so that he'd feel very comfortable coming back to me just in case. So I was glad when he came back a few months later and said, I'm crawling back to see if I think he'd agree that that's what he did to see if we could do it, with you. So that worked, but that's not to say that another system wouldn't do the kinds of services that we're using through the bepress system. But so these are really examples of journals that we have that are completely open. We have some others that they use the back end of the system and then they publish it through a traditional model because they have publishing contracts that they have to honor. Their plan is so I have more than one of these. Their plan is once the contract is over to examine what their future model is going to be. All right. Sorry, I got to find the right side of this. So then, all during this particular time, many best practices for open access journal publishing were underway. And I know that some of you are aware of many of these already, but this is kind of useful because it puts it all in one place. So the Committee on Publication Ethics is really key for editors and publishers because it really provides advice to them on their publication and research misconduct kind of issues so that they can go to them. There's all kinds of toolkits and other things there that they can use. Even if you're not a member, there are a lot of services there. The Directory of Open Access Journals, I'm sure many of you have pointed faculty to that for publishing or are trying to get, if you have a journal publishing system, trying to get journals in there. We'll talk more about that criteria in a second. That was difficult. But it's good because that means that the quality of what we're looking at as far as journals that are in the Directory of Open Access Journals is really high. And then also I can say to the faculty, look, if you want to create a new journal, my goal is that you are in there. Why? Because of the quality issues that people might consider and for other kinds of discovery mechanisms because the DOAJ journals are in various indices that they would look at for their more traditional journals. All the more reason to have your technical services folks involved in this from the get-go to make sure you've got really good metadata. Then the Open Access Scholarly Publisher Association, OASPA, is one that is really pushing hard for high quality, high standards in open access publishing. we're in the Library Publishing Coalition, which I'll mention again in a few minutes, but we tend to partner together along with all of these groups to make sure that we're all working in tandem on what are the pointers for high quality. And then there's the World Association of Medical Editors, which is also involved with these folks. We don't have a medical school. There's another medical school that's an hour east of us, but they work a lot with this particular association. Medical ethics is its own issue. So all of those groups that I just mentioned on that last screen got together to create this open access journal criteria. I don't know if you've seen these. It's a lengthy list, and you can find it on DOAJ's website, on COPE's website, several. But this is all going to probably look familiar, right? So ensure that the journal has a good, solid peer review process, that it has a governing body, such as an editorial board, that's visible on the site. And the editorial team and contact information is there. This is all pretty, it makes sense. But when we first started, it's like, oh, no, we didn't think about all these things. So that's why it's really good to have this checklist to go down. That if author fees are incurred, that it's clear on the site what they are, along with any copyright and licensing information. I have one journal that we'll talk about in a second that has retention of author rights for this particular scholarly society. And they will negotiate with people to keep their author rights as well, but that's what their first line of copyright says. And then how to deal with allegations of research misconduct. And that goes back to some of the COPE work that's on their particular website. Who owns it? Who manages it? At the bottom of each one of our journals, it said sponsored by University of Massachusetts Libraries. And the website to ensure that it really has high ethical professional standards. And that's one of the things that I think that by having the BPress website template, it really helps us look good. To make sure that the name of the journal isn't confusing, like it doesn't sound like some other journal that's already in existence that folks in the field would already know about. And if there are conflicts of interest between the the editors and the authors or anything, how does that get addressed and dealt with? The kind of access, is it completely open? Is it preferential to people in a scholarly society for a year and then it's open? You know, what kind of regulations do they have on that? And then if they have other sorts of revenue sources, we have a journal that is trying to get in some advertising right now. And is it against our ethics for them to have advertising? I said, well, as long as it's really clear, but I'd go back to your department head and your dean and see what the regulations are at the university level, because I don't know those. Do they publish, issue by issue twice a year, or do they do a rolling submission thing so that as things are approved, they go up? I'm trying to get more faculty to think that way, but they don't tend to think in that term. But if they want to have their content out there quickly and have people repeatedly come back to their site, they want to get new content up often. So with some of them, that's working, but many are still, this issue, yeah. And the archiving, do you have clocks, locks, Amazon S3 services? Where are all of those backup mechanisms? And marketing, there's marketing everywhere. So also some other things that we use for faculty when we're doing the education. I'm thinking that some of you may know about this Think, Check, Submit screen, and if you don't, you might check it out. That's right here. You use that for looking at various journals to see, are they trusted? Is it in the right subject field? You can check to see if you've got your references and things like that in good order. And then after you've gone through their checklist, then you can think about submitting to that journal. This is a counter to predatory journals that many of us hear about all the time. And we want to have in our toolkit a way to address this. We used to refer to Beale's List, but this is actually better, I think, to have something like this in our back pocket. So this is the check part, and I know I don't want you to read it all now, but it just goes through the various things that you need to ask yourself before you post in a particular journal. So there's lots of information there. Whoops. So who are some of the people that we've worked with over the past 10 or 11, 15, 10 years on this project? So obviously faculty, researchers, people involved in community engaged projects, that because we're a public land grant, we have this community engagement mission.
Right.
And so there's that. Students who are in undergraduate research, we have an honors college, so some of those students have content there. Obviously archivists and other librarians. And then we have worked with various academic officers, such as the provost's office, research. We used to have a separate office of outreach, but it's now become engagement. I probably should have put arrows, because it kind of evolved from that to these other things. The graduate school has been a partner from the very beginning. And back in the day when I first started doing these scholarly communication residencies, there was no money for new positions. So I said, oh, no money, let's figure this out. So since the grad school was taking advantage of the repository for a mandatory requirement for all the master's theses and dissertations to go into that, and they used the back end as their workflow process. I said, oh, well, maybe you'd be willing to support a resident librarian who could do more work for us all. And so they said yes. He goes, how much money do you want? And I'm going, wow, this is interesting. So out of my head, I just said, how about 10,000? Because at the time, I thought that would be like a quarter of what a beginning librarian would be. This was way back in 2007 and 2008. And so he agreed, and he was friends with the person who had led the Office of Research. So he said, why don't I go talk with Mike, and we'll see what we can do. So then I had $20,000 for going towards this residency program. And then, let's see, who else did I talk to? Oh, the Office of Outreach folks were getting really involved with this too. So then I went to the director knew I was doing this. I didn't want you to think that he wouldn't have known that I was doing this. And I had 3/4 of the money that for a professional librarian, an entry-level person. It would be a term position, 2 years, get them started with ScholComm. No library schools were doing this. So that's how we started that. And then last year, as you know, I got the full-time position. So I don't have the residency right now, but I'm going to see what I can do, because I'm really committed to the fact that we all need to be educating the new folks coming into the field. Who else? I don't know. Who else might you have that could be partners with you in all of this work? You might have some other departments or offices here at AU, or within the Washington Library Consortium, or whatever it's called. I'm sorry.
Our repository is actually broader. It also includes special collections. So we have
Yeah.
the sports department, sports center.
Yes.
Old
Yes.
films and,
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got some others you could look to for additional content. So this is what our ScholarWorks at UMass Amherst looks like. I'm an hour into this. Wow. I'll stop. Do you want me to stop now? So this is complicated. I don't like all that. I got to figure something out about that. But people don't come to this way. They come to it through Google Scholar, other places. So I care, but I kind of. have other things going on. So this is that Communication Plus One journal that I was talking about. I just did a little screenshot so you could get a sense of what it looks like. Don't ask me what that is up at the top. He told me once, but I don't remember. So you'll see that there's an editor-in-chief and there's a managing editor, and they have all the content about the journal, the advisory board, policies that they have. This is their professional organization. They have all kinds of social media you can track this with, how to submit an article, and if you want to subscribe versus just have it open. They just wanted that. So I said, okay, fine. So we did a lot of the check boxes that I was talking about earlier. This is the one that we retrofitted into being DOAJ compliant and submitted it and got approved. But that was so much work. Zach did the work for it. We didn't, because he knew the answers. He knew how to fix what needed to be fixed. And so I was really pleased when we were able to do that. And it was an educational experience for sure.
So do you work closely with your IT department to make sure this all runs smoothly?
No IT department because it's the BPress platform.
I see.
So that's why he had tried the OJS system and just said, I just can't manage it. And our IT shop in the library is really small. So it hasn't had any bandwidth to be able to do this. That said, they have started up a Fedora repository in our special collections. So we have that as a separate. So they now have experience with Fedora, not at the Islandora, but the other. Yeah. So that's what they use. But we'd have to have 3 or 4 different packages in order to do what we're doing. So anyway, so there's one. Here's another example. This is, we'll show you that they go all over our country. I have another one that has editors all over the world, actually. This was a challenge because Whitney, who's the editor at UMass, wanted to have it be housed at our institution. She was well aware of this. We have all the Du Bois papers, collections, and things like that. And so that's why she thought it'd be really important to get this here. And so, but then we got talking, and she said, but it started in Illinois, and then it went here, and then it's there, and I've got PDFs here, and I've got other kinds of just HTML files here, and I've got newslettery things, because they're really articles, even though it says newsletter. And I'm sorry, I should have crunched that down, so you could have seen. But it was, it took a long time to get all this together. I think she got a little frustrated with us because it took us quite a bit of time to pull together all the back issues and things like that. But now everything is here. That was another really good educational opportunity for us, I would say. And then another one of my favorites. This is the one we're working on right now to get into DOAJ. It's not there yet. You have to depend on the editors to do this final proofing work and say yes and change a little bit of their patterns. So it's been a little more difficult. But this is really one of our more heavily downloaded journals. It's a big research area. I like him, he's great. And the last one I'll show you is the Landscapes of Violence. This actually started as a conference. And what he wanted to do was to take the best of the conference and have it be the inaugural issue of this Landscapes of Violence interdisciplinary journal. So that was another type of experience to have. And that's the one that has editors from around the world. I know I'm out of time, right? Oh, okay. So then that led me, especially with our most recent resident, into the whole topic of the issues of diversity in publication. And so I just give you here 3 of the recent things that have come out either at conferences or Charlotte Rowe and her work in CRNL News, and her work with Harrison Foucault over at Iowa State, if I said his name right, looking at who are the editors of these journals, who are the peer reviewers, therefore how is the work being gathered and evaluated for inclusion in journals. There's lots of topic areas to talk about more there that we could go into. It could be another whole talk. And I would recommend that people in this area have, a guest speaker maybe come in and speak to this, because I think it's a huge one. Scholarly Kitchen put out this blog on the 27th. 15 things we can do to stand up for science. You all know what's been happening since January, and all the facts and new facts and pseudo-facts. So she has a lot of really good things to say there. I don't know that I want to go into it in great detail, but she talks about the Think, Check, Submit that we just spoke about, the way to make sure that we have credit for high quality journal content and articles and good citations. There's a transparency and openness guidelines that's coming out of the Center for Open Science. That is another good thing to be looking at to make sure that we have good, authentic facts. And she talked specifically about things like PLOS and Science Exchange. And consider more than the traditional double-blind peer review. Look into like open peer review, like eLife and some other examples that are having open review. And even way back, decades ago now, archive.org had, faculties in physics and some other associated disciplines putting their working papers and draft articles there, and it was always an open review kind of situation. The use of open annotation tools, such as Hypothesis. Open data, supporting Force 11's fair data principles. If you're familiar with Force 11, you could check that out on your phone. And some other, making sure that we do use the persistent identifiers, whether we use our ORCID IDs for students. We're working with a graduate school now to recommend that all of the graduate students who are putting in master's theses and doctoral dissertations have ORCID IDs, and that they create DOIs for their theses. And the reasons why you'd want to do that. She also talked about the Committee for Publication Ethics that we already just alluded to, and use a reputable software tool for cross-ref for checking references and things like that to make sure that those are legit. So there's a lot of really good pointers in here for us to be looking at and making sure that we're following as we advocate for open. Key things here with librarians really being here to demonstrate our value across the whole institution. I don't know about all of you, but I've been involved in strategic planning at the university level. We talk about assessment, we talk about online learning, how we can better collaborate with the teaching and research faculty. One of our librarians is on a committee that is looking at student learning outcomes, student success. So there's a lot that we can offer in those particular areas. I mean, what you're doing here for the environment for the students and looking to refresh your services that you offer, we're doing exactly the same thing. How that fits into open access journals, I'm not really sure, other than I think it's all part and parcel of what we're thinking and what we're evolving into. And the fact that we're also educators. I mean, I mentioned about the copyright and some of these other pieces. So how do we keep up with all of this? That's a real issue and a real concern. I just have here just a few things that I use on a regular basis to keep up with things, as well as, you know, like going to conferences and listening to what other people are having to say. But one of the things that I really get involved in quite a bit is the Library Publishing Coalition. I was involved on their directory when they started. I said, this is such important work. I volunteered to go onto the board. Are you part of the Library Publishing Coalition? You know about the Library Publishing Coalition? So it's a bunch of libraries who are working together in this open space and working with some of those other associations I was talking about, like OASPA and some of those others, looking at high quality standards and where is publishing support going in libraries these days. I'm on a subcommittee there, which is actually received an IMLS grant to develop a library publishing curriculum. So we're going to be looking at the applications that just came in yesterday, and working with the folks who put together these proposals, and it's going to be a 15-week curriculum, and it'll all be open, and we can all grab pieces out of it as we see fit for what we're trying to do for our own work. I don't know exactly what it's going to end up looking like, but we've got policy, content, sustainability, and impact as the four main themes. So, and diversity overrides it all, and how we get diversity as an integral part in the services that we're trying to provide through libraries. You all know about Spark, though, yes? All right. So, where are we going with all of this? What is the goal? So, just a few thoughts. So we I think want to focus on the quality and high impact that we can make in scholarly publishing. I think we see that where we have to still expand library publishing services, components, and best practices. That's part of why I felt really strongly committed to being on that library publishing committee, coalition committee, to develop that curriculum, because it seems like it's really sorely needed. I think that there's nothing going on in library schools, or very little still in this area. And we can transform academic culture. We have to be there supporting it, but we can certainly advocate for this at many levels within our own institutions, so that libraries become principal publishers of scholarly work. I mean, we all know that we're the authors, peer reviewers, editors of these materials. We need to figure out how we can take that back. We have to have the infrastructure in place first before we do that. One of our colleagues, Anita Walls, over at Virginia Tech, did a, within Virginia Tech document, she was head of a small task force that was looking at the open licensing for library-created content, whether it's MARC records or subject guides or web pages or whatever. Do we have CC licenses on these things? We share them all the time. We don't have licenses on them. I just said, oh my gosh, I never thought of that, right? Those are things we can do to show other people what we're talking about when we're talking about open. So, have you heard about the Open Access 2020 initiative, perchance? So that's another thing you could look at. The goal is to convert journals from subscription to OA by actually looking at how we can redirect subscription dollars into supporting open access funds and to finance the services that I've just been talking about. So what do you all think? Do you all think that we could do this? We can start making baby steps, though. Can't we start? We could start doing this, right? We could start doing this. You could become familiar with the Open Access 2020 initiative, see what the goals are, see what you think you could do. Let's see. The transformation has to start with libraries, it says. Why is that? It's because we have all those dollars wrapped up in subscriptions, memberships, and other things. And we have to figure out how to reallocate those dollars into other avenues. Even a small open access fund. Just to get the thing started, see what happens from it. We have to evolve and change our roles around so that we're active participants with faculty in their research and teaching endeavors. That's something we can do right away, really seriously. We have the skills, we just don't, we always have thought about being in support of instead of working in action and in tandem with them. So if you talk about the IRB, for example, I have friends who are at Tufts who are on those IRB boards. We're not. I'm going, oh. So I talked to the person who runs the IRB board at UMass Amherst, and she goes, you mean there are librarians who'd want to be on that? That would be awesome. Oh no, more work. But you know, I mean, we just need to think about what we're trying to do. So, and they have a whole transformation roadmap within the OA 2020 initiative. So, yeah, I'm talking too long.
We have time for a few questions, and then I just want to say that at noon, you're all welcome to stay. We do have a little bit of lunch that you can eat some and talk a little bit more to Marilyn and her colleagues. So if we have a few questions.
I have two questions related to the digital object identifiers.
Yes.
You said that the faculty were sick of 404.
The 404.
What did you, if anything, have to do to convince them that that is the solution to the problem? That's one side of the question. The other one is how technically do you get the DOIs into ScholarWorks? What do you have to do for that?
Oh, okay. So the first thing I did was before we had DOIs, I said if we put the content into Bepress, we'll have a persistent URL, and then that will always be there, and you don't have to worry about 404s. And then, so that was a few years ago. And then when the whole possibility of having DOIs came up, I started talking to them about digital object identifiers and saying, this is better because that way multiple things that connect to the DOI, they can all be interconnected automatically by machines, you know. And so it would be the best to do that. So we worked with EasyID, and so we just, it's just a templated form, and you just fill it out, and you get your DOI for your individual article. And then with, excuse me, with the Bepress folks, we said we need to have a field for the DOIs, so we have that.
Is there an automatic way in
We have,
click something and you get the DOI? And
no, I haven't done that. I haven't done that. I should,
that's how we do it. That's
yeah, I should find out if we, I haven't even thought about that part, but that makes more sense, yeah.
No question. It's obvious that open access is a good thing because it means your work is going to get more broadly disseminated. Do you have any faculty members, though, who have noticed a difference from before they had their work open access and then after?
So here's a story. I have all these stories. I have a faculty member who, let me see, he is in the, he's now emeritus, but at the time he wasn't. He is in the English department, and he does some sort of writing, specialized writing technique of whatever type. In a way, it doesn't matter. But he's very well known in that particular sphere. But he didn't get his work out as well as maybe he wanted to. And so he has a faculty author page. He put his work up there. He got a request from folks in Denmark to come and give a talk, which he was very honored to do. And he said, I would not have received that invitation if I hadn't had my work up and more accessible. So they were, his work is more like articles rather than like book length things. That's one example. And I'm sure I have others, but that's the first thing that comes to mind, and it's in the humanities, which is why I like it. Because sometimes the humanities folks don't believe me, so to speak. So it's nice to have a few of those examples. I have another, so open education. I go there for a second, and we can really go there if you want to go there, because that seems to be where I really go now, right? That's where I go. So I have a faculty member. We have these little mini grants we give faculty for flipping over to a open educational resource or creating one. So this faculty member said there's nothing in my field. He's an engineer, and he wanted statistics and probability or some such thing for engineers. And so he said, I'm just going to take my little grant and create something. I spent a whole summer doing all this work. And so we have a link over to his webpage within our repository, because he changes it all the time. So he doesn't. I haven't convinced him yet to put it in the repository, but he has a print copy that's for sale on Amazon. It's like, that's all I want. It's just a PDF. And anyway, he has received requests for his work from folks all over the world, especially in the Middle East, for whatever reason. But that's really exciting. I'm just very thrilled about that. Wicked psyched, I'll just say, because I'm from Maine.
2 questions. So who is funding the mini grant?
So when we started with the mini grants for the open educational resources, it was a combo of the provost's office and the library. We've had a new provost for the past 3 years. She hasn't actively supported us through mini grants, but all of the announcements for the mini grants go out through her office. So right now, so we are using some of those Friends dollars that I mentioned earlier. And I'm pushing the envelope a bit and asking her, because I feel very strongly that we're exploiting our faculty by having them create textbooks for $1,000 or $2,500, to see if she'd be willing to give us a $10,000 amount that I'll use for one faculty member for creating one textbook. So she came back and said, but they get $50,000 from publishers to do this. And they do. And I just said, well, understood, but I know I've got faculty out there who would do it for $10,000 because they've been doing it. And she wouldn't have that knowledge because she wasn't here when that was happening. That previous example, for instance. But so I think she might do that. And then the end of April, we're coordinating academic success, academic innovation conference for the whole system over in Boston. And so the whole open education thing is one of the themes for that particular conference. So I'm hoping that actually the university system is going to get behind this more than it has so far.
Yeah, that's my second question. So are you also, so it sounds like you're pushing for the creation of OER materials. Are you also pushing for the adoption?
So what we're going to do is switch our model out, because some other folks have done this. They've done like $500 grants for adoption, $1,000 or $1,500 for adapting, which means mixing and remixing bunches of different types of open education resources for their own course. And then for the creation, we want to have this one grant. So those are coming. That grant proposal is coming out Open Education Week, which is the last full week in March. So we'll see how that goes. So
I will be stalking.
So good. So you may know Jeremy Smith's name. He works for me now in open education. So the open education thing became so successful that my previous director also said, Marilyn, you need to have somebody helping you with that. So I've got 2 new full-time positions just in the last 3 years. It's been kind of exhilarating, actually. Hang on tight for the ride. You never know where it's going to take you. So thank you all so much. And I know that, does anybody else have like a quick question? We could talk more. Yeah, we could, yeah.
Yeah, so please feel free to chat Marilyn up during lunch, but I just
Yeah.
want to say thank you all for coming.
Yes.
We have one more with also
Yes,
about libraries
yes.
and publishers. We have one more of these in this series this year. It's in April 13th. Flyers are on that little table. There are other flyers for other AU library programming there also if you're interested. So thank you all very much and enjoy your lunch.
Yeah, thank you.